When we talk about success, most people immediately think about results. They think about the promotion, the trophy, the bonus, the applause. That's how we've been conditioned. From the time we're children, we're told that grades measure our intelligence, that medals prove our ability, and that awards define our worth. And so we grow up chasing numbers, chasing recognition, chasing outcomes. But here's the problem: results are illusions. They are not permanent, they are not reliable, and they are never enough. Think about it. You win the award, and within a week you're already asking yourself, what's next? You get the big promotion, and in a month you're restless again. You hit a milestone, and soon it feels ordinary. That's the illusion of results. They look like the end, but they never are. They are simply checkpoints, not the finish line. And if you build your entire life around those checkpoints, you'll never feel at peace. Because every time you reach one, another appears. It's like running a race on a treadmill. You keep moving, you keep sweating, you keep pushing, but you never actually arrive anywhere. The results tease you, they motivate you, but they don't fulfill you. And that's why so many people who look successful on the outside feel empty on the inside. They work so hard for the applause, and when it came, it wasn't enough. They thought the outcome would bring meaning, but it didn't. Here's a story. There was once a young athlete obsessed with becoming number one in his sport. He trained harder than everyone. He studied his opponents. He sacrificed everything for that gold medal. And one day he won. He stood on the podium, heard the national anthem, saw the flag rise, felt the crowd roar. For that moment, he was on top of the world. But 2 weeks later, he fell into a deep depression. Why? Because the very thing he thought would give him everlasting fulfillment lasted only seconds. The illusion had faded. The medal was real, but the meaning he attached to it wasn't. This isn't about sports alone. It's about business. It's about careers. It's about life. We believe that once we hit a certain revenue target, once we land that dream client, once we achieve that recognition, we'll finally feel complete. But results, no matter how big or small, are fleeting. They disappear. They fade. They cannot sustain us. And this is where so many organizations and individuals go wrong. They become result-obsessed. They set quarterly targets, revenue goals, or KPIs, and make them the entire focus of their culture. Hitting the number becomes obsession. But when numbers are all that matter, people stop caring about the work itself. They cut corners, they compromise values, they burn themselves out. And even when the numbers are achieved, the joy is temporary, because immediately the pressure to repeat or exceed begins again. It's a hamster wheel. I once met a CEO of a company that had just crossed $1 billion in revenue. You'd think he'd be ecstatic. But when I sat with him, he looked exhausted. I asked him how he felt. He said, "I thought this milestone would feel different, but all I can think about is how to hit the next billion." That's the illusion. The number didn't bring peace, it only raised the bar higher. Results are important, yes, but they are not the purpose. They are a reflection, not the foundation. They are like a mirror. They show you where you are, but they don't tell you who you are. When we confuse the two, we get lost. We start believing our worth is defined by what we achieve, rather than how we work, how we live, and how we serve. The illusion of results is dangerous because it tricks us into thinking we are in control. We are not. You can control your effort, your consistency, your dedication, but you cannot fully control the outcome. There are always variables outside of your hands. Timing, market shifts, other people's decisions, luck. If you tie your identity to results, you've placed your sense of worth in something you can't control. And that's a recipe for anxiety. Consider two musicians. One writes music because she loves the craft. She spends hours experimenting with melodies, writing lyrics, learning instruments. She gets lost in the process. For her, the joy is in the making. If her song becomes a hit, she celebrates. If it doesn't, she still feels fulfilled because she poured herself into the work. Now consider the second musician. He writes only for the charts. He calculates trends, copies what's popular, and only feels valuable when his songs top the list. The day his track doesn't hit the charts, he feels like a failure. Same industry, same opportunity, but completely different fulfillment. The first has built her peace in the work. The second has built his anxiety in the results. This is the trap so many of us fall into. We believe the outcome validates the work. But in truth, it is the work that validates the outcome. You can achieve a result through shortcuts, manipulation, or luck. But you cannot build mastery, growth, and purpose without the work. Think about inventors. The greatest breakthroughs in history didn't come from people chasing trophies. They came from people obsessed with discovery. Thomas Edison didn't try to invent the light bulb for awards. He was obsessed with solving a problem. He failed over 1,000 times. But each failure was part of the process. The result, the working bulb, was inevitable because the obsession was with the work, not the result. And this is the irony when you stop obsessing over results and start obsessing over the work. The results actually come faster and stronger because your energy isn't wasted on anxiety about the finish line. It's invested in the steps. And step by step, you build something meaningful. Imagine climbing a mountain. If you stare only at the peak, you'll feel overwhelmed. You'll feel like it's impossible. But if you focus on each step, the process becomes manageable, even enjoyable. And before you know it, you look up and realize how far you've come. The peak takes care of itself. That's the illusion of results. They look like the goal, but they're simply the byproduct of consistent steps. There's another danger in result obsession. It narrows your vision. You become so focused on the scoreboard that you miss the opportunities around you. You don't notice the lessons, the relationships, the growth. You're so fixated on getting there that you miss the joy of being here. And that's tragic because life doesn't happen in the result. Life happens in the process. Ask yourself when you look back at your life, what will matter more? The titles you earned, the numbers you hit, the awards on your shelf, or the people you impacted, the lessons you learned, the craft you mastered, the journey you took. Results may look good in history books, but it's the work, the day-to-day effort, the persistence, the passion that builds a meaningful story. The illusion of results is seductive. It whispers, once you get there, you'll finally be happy. But fulfillment doesn't come at the finish line. It comes in every moment you commit to the work. It comes in the early mornings when no one's watching. It comes in the late nights when you're still refining. It comes in the quiet progress, the unseen struggles, the invisible victories. That's where the real joy lies. And so the challenge is simple but difficult. Shift your obsession. Stop asking, what will I get if I do this? And start asking, who will I become if I keep doing this? Results answer the first question, but only the work answers the second. And who you become will always matter more than what you get. So yes, celebrate results when they come. Acknowledge them, appreciate them, but don't get tricked by them. Because the moment you confuse them for your purpose, you've lost sight of the real game. The results are not the destination. They are simply signs along the way, reminding you that you're moving forward. The destination is the work itself, the craft, the growth, the impact, the meaning. Because at the end of the day, results fade, but the work shapes you. Results are temporary, but the work is permanent. Results are illusions, but the work is real. We live in a world where almost everyone is rushing toward the finish line. We are told that happiness comes once we arrive, once we get the job, once we build the business, once we buy the house, once we hit the milestone. That's when we'll finally feel fulfilled. But here's the truth most people don't realize until it's too late. Joy doesn't come from the finish line. Joy comes from the process. It's not what we get at the end that makes life meaningful. It's what we become while we're doing the work. The process is where the magic happens. It's in the early mornings when you're practicing your craft, not the night of the big performance. It's in the late nights refining an idea, not the moment the product launches. It's in the struggle, the repetition, the learning, the failing, and the improving. That's where growth lives. That's where fulfillment lives. The result might last a day, a week, maybe even a year, but the process lasts a lifetime. Think about an artist painting a masterpiece. Most people only see the final piece hanging in a gallery. They admire the brushstrokes, the colors, the beauty. But the artist doesn't fall in love with the finished canvas. The artist falls in love with the hours spent mixing colors, layering paint, making mistakes, starting over, finding flow. That's the joy. The painting on the wall is just a reminder of the process, not the reward itself. This applies to everything we do. Entrepreneurs who love the hustle of building something from scratch, they thrive even in the messy middle. Athletes who love the grind of training, they wake up every day excited, not just for game day, but for practice itself. Writers who love the discipline of putting words on a page, they find satisfaction even if their book never makes a bestseller list, because the process is the reward. The irony is that when you actually fall in love with the process, results show up more naturally. Why? Because you're consistent. You're not motivated by an occasional outcome, you're fueled by daily passion. And when passion drives consistency, excellence becomes inevitable. But here's the challenge: we've been taught to see the process as a necessary evil, something to endure until we get the outcome. Students are told to study hard so they can pass the exam. Employees are told to work hard so they can get the promotion. Athletes are told to train hard so they can win the championship. In every case, the process is framed as a sacrifice, a cost, something unpleasant we must push through just to get the reward at the end. And that's why so many people quit halfway. They hate the process, and the result isn't enough to sustain them. Those who thrive see it differently. They don't study just to pass, they study because they love learning. They don't train just to win. They train because they love movement, improvement, growth. They don't work just for a title, they work because they believe in what they're building. When the process itself becomes the source of joy, quitting isn't even an option. Because you're not doing it for the trophy, you're doing it for the love of the game. There's a story I once heard about a baker. Every morning at 3 a.m., while the world was still asleep, he would begin kneading dough in his small bakery. Day after day, year after year, before the sun rose, he would be there mixing, kneading, shaping, baking. Customers loved his bread, and eventually he became well known in his community. Someone asked him once, "Don't you ever get tired of waking up at 3 a.m.?" Don't you ever feel like it's too much? He smiled and said, no, because this is when I'm happiest. When my hands are in the dough, when I smell the bread rising, when I see the first loaf come out of the oven, I feel alive. The customers, the money, the reputation, those are nice. But the making, that's where the joy is. That is the secret. Joy is not found at the end of the road. Joy is found in walking the road. And yet, it's so easy to overlook this truth because the world celebrates outcomes, not effort. The headlines announce who won the race, not who trained in silence for years. The magazines feature the successful entrepreneur, not the late nights, the failures, the tears along the way. The audience applauds the performance, not the lonely hours of rehearsal. Society makes us believe the outcome is everything, when in reality, it's only the surface, the depth, the meaning, the fulfillment. That all happens behind the scenes in the process. This is why some of the most successful people in the world continue to work even when they don't have to. They'd already made the money, won the awards, built the empire, but they keep showing up every day. Why? Not because they need more results, but because they love the work. They've discovered that the joy was never in the result. It was in the doing. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever finished a big project? Maybe something you worked on for months, and then when it was done, you felt a strange emptiness. That's the post-result void. You thought finishing it would make you feel complete, but instead, you felt a little lost. That's because the joy wasn't in the completion, it was in the creation. The late nights, the brainstorming sessions, the breakthroughs, that's what brought you alive. The result just closed the chapter. This is why retirement can feel so difficult for some people. They think they want to rest after years of working, but when the process stops, they lose their sense of joy. It wasn't the paycheck that gave them meaning. It was the daily rhythm of doing the work, solving problems, creating impact. Without the process, they feel empty even if they have all the results they once dreamed of. So the lesson is simple but profound. If you want a life of fulfillment, stop chasing only outcomes. Start embracing the process. Learn to enjoy the small steps, the daily effort, the routine. Because if you can't find joy in the process, you won't find joy in the result either. The result won't be enough. And let's be honest, the process isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's frustrating, repetitive, even boring. But that's where the difference lies. The people who achieve lasting fulfillment are not the ones who avoid the hard parts, but the ones who embrace them. They see repetition as mastery. They see mistakes as lessons. They see the grind as the gift, because every day in the process is an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become. Think about a musician practicing scales. To most people, it sounds dull, monotonous. But to the musician, every scale is sharpening skill, deepening understanding, building freedom to express. The joy isn't just in the concert, it's in the scales. Because without the scales, the concert would never exist. Or think about a gardener. The joy isn't only in seeing the flowers bloom. It's in planting seeds, watering them, pulling weeds, tending the soil. It's in showing up every day to care for something that may not bloom for months. The bloom is beautiful, but it's just a moment. The gardening, that's the process, and that's where the real joy is. The joy in the process also gives us resilience, because results are fragile. Markets crash, opportunities disappear, trophies are taken away, titles are forgotten. But if your joy is in the process, none of that can take it away from you. They can strip away the results, but they can't steal your love of the work. And that love is what keeps you going when circumstances are against you. That's why the best innovators, leaders, and creators are never satisfied with one success. They don't stop at one invention, one product, one achievement. They go back to the lab, back to the studio, back to the field. Because their joy isn't in being done, their joy is in doing. So here's the challenge for all of us. Instead of asking, what will I get if I do this? Start asking, will I enjoy doing this even if I don't get the result I want? If the answer is yes, then you found something worth pursuing. Because the process itself will sustain you whether or not the outcome comes. The joy is in the process, in the practice, in the growth, in the doing. Results will come and go, but the process will always be with you. Fall in love with it, and you'll never run out of joy. There's a difference between obsession that destroys you and obsession that sustains you. Most people don't realize this. They think obsession itself is dangerous, that it burns you out, that it leaves you empty. But the truth is, it's not obsession that destroys us, it's what we choose to obsess over. If you obsess over results, you will eventually collapse. If you obsess over the work, you will thrive. Because one drains you while the other sustains you. When people hear the word obsession, they think of something unhealthy. They imagine someone pushing themselves to exhaustion, sacrificing everything, burning the candle at both ends just to achieve an outcome. And yes, when the obsession is outcome-driven, that's exactly what happens. Results are fragile. They are temporary, unpredictable, often outside of your control. If your entire sense of worth is built on hitting a certain number, winning a certain award, reaching a certain milestone, you are setting yourself up for anxiety, disappointment, and collapse. But obsession with the work is different. Obsession with the work is sustainable because it's rooted in something you can control. It's rooted in effort, consistency, curiosity, and growth. When you fall in love with the work itself, you don't need to wait for results to validate you. Every day becomes meaningful because every day you are building, learning, and becoming. That kind of obsession doesn't drain you, it fuels you. Think of it like a fire. If you burn wood soaked in gasoline, it flares up fast, but it burns out just as quickly. That's results-driven obsession. It gives you a burst of energy, but it cannot last. But if you build a fire with strong, dry wood, if you tend to it patiently, feeding it steadily, that fire can burn for hours, even days. That's work-driven obsession. It is slower, steadier, but it keeps you warm for the long haul. There's a story of a young founder who built his company around hitting numbers. Every quarter was a mad rush to reach targets. He worked nonstop, slept little, and pushed his team relentlessly. They hit their goals, but each time, the pressure to outdo the last quarter grew heavier. Eventually, the company collapsed under the weight of exhaustion and unmet expectations. Why? Because the obsession was only about the scoreboard, and the scoreboard always demands more. Now consider another founder. She built her company around solving a problem she cared deeply about. Every day, she focused not on how fast she could grow, but on how well she could serve her customers, how much better she could make the product, how much more she could learn about her craft. Of course, she had goals, but they weren't her obsession. Her obsession was with the work. And because of that, even when results were slow, she stayed energized. Even when she failed, she kept going because her joy wasn't dependent on the outcome. Over time, her company grew stronger and stronger, not because she chased results, but because she chased excellence in the work. That's the power of sustainable obsession. The reason work-driven obsession sustains us is because it feeds curiosity. When you are obsessed with the work, you're constantly asking, how can I get better? How can I improve? How can I learn something new? That curiosity keeps you alive. It keeps you from getting bored. It keeps you resilient even when things don't go your way. Because if the joy is in the process of learning and growing, there's never a day wasted. On the other hand, result-driven obsession kills curiosity. When all you care about is the outcome, you stop asking questions. You don't explore. You don't experiment. You don't risk failing because failure feels like death. You become rigid, narrow, afraid. And fear is the enemy of growth. This is why some people work themselves to death and still feel empty, while others work just as hard and feel alive. It's not the hours they put in, it's what those hours are serving. If your hours are serving results alone, they will drain you. If your hours are serving the work itself, they will give back more than you put in. There's another reason work-driven obsession is sustainable. It's consistent. Results are inconsistent. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. But the work is always there. You can show up to it every day. You can control how much you give, how much you grow, how much you commit. And when your identity is built on consistency rather than outcomes, you become steady. You are not thrown off course by every success or failure. You are grounded. Let me give you an example. There are two runners training for a marathon. One is obsessed with finishing under a certain time. Every practice run is judged by the clock. If he doesn't beat his time, he feels like a failure. His entire worth as a runner depends on that one number. The second runner is obsessed with the process of running itself. She loves the discipline, the rhythm of her breath, the feeling of her feet on the ground. She pays attention to her form, her strength, her endurance. Of course, she wants to finish well, but her obsession is not the clock, it's the craft. Who do you think will enjoy training more? Who do you think will keep running long after the race is over? The second runner, because her obsession sustains her. The first will likely quit once he burns out chasing times that never seem good enough. Sustainable obsession also builds resilience. When your obsession is the work, you can survive failure because failure doesn't end the work. Failure is part of it. You can embrace mistakes as learning, setbacks as lessons. But when your obsession is the result, failure feels catastrophic. It crushes you because it feels like the very thing you were chasing slipped away. The truth is, the people who change the world are almost always the ones who are obsessed with the work, not the results. Inventors obsessed with solving problems, not with fame. Artists obsessed with creation, not with recognition. Leaders obsessed with serving, not with titles. And because their obsession is rooted in something infinite, the work itself, they keep going long after others stop. Think about the greatest scientists in history. They weren't chasing awards, they were chasing discovery. They didn't know if they would ever find what they were looking for. But the process of experimenting, questioning, and learning was enough to keep them going. And because of that obsession, they made discoveries that changed humanity. The irony is that when you stop obsessing over results and start obsessing over the work, you often achieve results beyond anything you imagined. Because results are byproducts of consistent, passionate effort. They cannot be forced, but they can be earned through devotion to the craft. But this takes a shift in mindset. Most of us are wired to ask, what will I get if I do this? That's a result-driven question. The better question is, who will I become if I keep doing this? That's a work-driven question. Because results give you something temporary, but the work shapes you permanently. So what does sustainable obsession look like in practice? It looks like showing up every day, not because you're promised success, but because you love the process of becoming better. It looks like pouring yourself into the details, the repetitions, the fundamentals, knowing that even if no one notices, you are still growing. It looks like treating failures not as defeats, but as raw material for progress. The truth is, obsession is not optional. Every one of us will be obsessed with something. The question is, will you be obsessed with results that fade or with work that endures? One will burn you out, the other will build you up. One will make you anxious, the other will make you resilient. One will leave you empty, the other will leave you fulfilled. So if you're going to be obsessed, make it sustainable. Don't obsess over the scoreboard. Obsess over the game. Don't obsess over the trophy. Obsess over the training. Don't obsess over being recognized. Obsess over being excellent. Because when you do, you'll find that obsession is not your enemy, it is your ally. It doesn't destroy you, it sustains you. It doesn't drain you, it energizes you. And maybe the greatest gift of sustainable obsession is this: it keeps you in love with the journey. Because at the end of the day, results will come and go. They may make headlines, they may gather applause, but they don't last. The work, however, is always with you. And when you fall in love with it, you will never run out of energy, never run out of growth, never run out of joy. So the choice is yours. Burn out chasing results that will never satisfy, or burn bright with an obsession for the work that makes you come alive. One path ends quickly. The other path lasts a lifetime. Choose wisely. We live in a culture obsessed with scoreboards. Everywhere you look, numbers are flashing in our faces. Quarterly earnings, social media followers, test scores, market share, rankings like Vietrix, data. The scoreboard is seductive because it's simple. It gives us something to measure, something to compare, something to chase. But here's the problem: the scoreboard changes every day. One moment you're up, the next you're down. One quarter you're winning, the next you're losing. The scoreboard is temporary. Reputation is not. Reputation is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's the story of how you show up, how you treat people, how you handle pressure, how you live your values. The scoreboard may tell you if you won today, but your reputation will tell the world who you are for years to come. And if you have to choose between the two, always choose reputation, because a scoreboard can get wiped clean in a single moment, but reputation is what endures. Think of an athlete. On any given night, they might win or lose. The scoreboard reflects that night's performance, but their reputation comes from how they played, not just whether they won. Did they give their best effort? Did they respect the game? Did they uplift their teammates? Did they stay humble in victory and gracious in defeat? That's what people remember long after the scoreboard has been forgotten. In business, the same truth applies. Companies that chase quarterly numbers at any cost may hit their targets, but often at the expense of trust. They cut corners, squeeze employees, sacrifice quality. For a while, the scoreboard looks good, but eventually customers notice, employees leave, and the truth comes out. The scoreboard can be manipulated. Reputation cannot. Once trust is broken, numbers won't save you. I once met a leader who was obsessed with being number one in his industry. He celebrated every chart, every ranking, every statistic that put his company ahead. But behind the scenes, people hated working there. The culture was toxic, employees felt disposable, and customers felt neglected. For a while, the scoreboard glowed brightly. But within a few years, the company collapsed. Why? Because you can't build a lasting legacy on temporary numbers. You build it on reputation. Now consider another leader I met. She wasn't obsessed with being number one. She was obsessed with being trustworthy. She cared about her employees, invested in their growth, listened to her customers, and refused to compromise her values for quick wins. Did her company always top the charts? No, but year after year, decade after decade, her reputation grew stronger. And because of that, people wanted to work with her, buy from her, follow her. When crisis hit, her company didn't crumble, it thrived. Because trust once earned is far more powerful than numbers. The scoreboard is a snapshot. Reputation is a story. The scoreboard shows what you did in one moment. Reputation shows how you've lived over many moments. The scoreboard is about outcomes. Reputation is about character. And here's the irony. If you focus on your reputation, if you consistently do the right thing, serve others, and show up with integrity, the scoreboard usually takes care of itself. The danger of chasing the scoreboard is that it tempts you to take shortcuts. You're behind in the game, so you bend the rules. You're desperate to hit the target, so you push people harder than they can handle. You want to look good today, so you sacrifice tomorrow. And in the process, you may win the point, but you lose the trust. And once trust is lost, the victory means nothing. There's a saying, reputation is built in drops and lost in buckets. You can spend years building trust, showing consistency, earning respect, and then in one careless moment, it can all be gone. That's why reputation matters more than the scoreboard, because the scoreboard forgives mistakes. Reputation does not. Think about your own life. Do you remember every grade you ever got in school? Do you remember every number from every job? Probably not. But you do remember the teachers who cared about you, the mentors who believed in you, the bosses who supported you, the colleagues who treated you with respect. You remember people's reputations, not their scoreboards. It's the same with leadership. People don't follow leaders because of their titles or numbers. They follow them because of their reputation, because they trust them, because they know who they are. Numbers may impress for a moment, but character inspires for a lifetime. The challenge is that reputation takes longer to build. Scoreboards give immediate feedback. You can check your likes right now. You can look at your revenue this quarter. You can see your ranking today. Reputation doesn't work that way. It's slower, quieter, harder to measure, but it is also far stronger. The scoreboard is a sprint. Reputation is a marathon. And let's be honest, it's tempting to chase the scoreboard because it feels good. It feels good to hit targets, to win awards, to see the numbers climb. But that feeling doesn't last. And if that's the only thing driving, you'll end up empty. Reputation, on the other hand, gives you something deeper. It gives you respect, trust, and loyalty. And those are the things that last. There's a story about a teacher who spent 40 years in the classroom. She never won awards, never made headlines, never appeared on any scoreboard. But her reputation was extraordinary. Her students spoke of her with gratitude. Her colleagues admired her dedication. Her community respected her deeply. She changed lives quietly without recognition. Years later, when she retired, hundreds of former students came back to thank her. That's reputation. The scoreboard never noticed her, but her impact will outlive her. The truth is, scoreboards make noise, but reputation makes echoes. Scoreboards shout for a moment, but reputation whispers for generations. And when you're gone, no one will care what numbers you hit. They will care about how you made them feel, how you treated them, what you stood for. That's what will remain. So the question you have to ask yourself is this: are you living for the scoreboard, or are you living for your reputation? If you're chasing numbers, you may look successful today, but you'll struggle to sustain it. If you're building reputation, you may not always look like you're winning, but you will always matter. And here's the beauty of it: reputation doesn't require perfection. You don't have to win every game, hit every target, or top every chart. What builds reputation is consistency. Showing up, being honest, admitting mistakes, treating people with respect, doing the right thing even when it's hard. That's what people remember. That's what lasts. There's a line I once heard: when all is said and done, people won't remember your numbers, they'll remember your name. Not the letters after it, not the titles attached to it, but the name itself. And what your name stands for, that's reputation. The scoreboard will always tempt you. It will tempt you to think that winning now is all that matters. But resist the temptation. Focus instead on building something deeper, something stronger. Because when the numbers fade, your reputation will remain. And in the end, that's the real victory. So yes, play the game. Yes, strive to win. Yes, set goals and measure progress. But don't confuse the scoreboard for success. Success is not being ahead today. It's being remembered tomorrow. It's not the number you achieve, it's the name you leave behind. The scoreboard tells the world if you're winning. Reputation tells the world who you are. And who you are will always matter more. We have been taught almost from the beginning of our lives to play finite games. From childhood, we compete in sports where the rules are clear, the players are known, and the objective is to win. In school, we take exams where the grading scale is fixed, and the measure of success is a number on a paper. Later in business, we chase quarterly results, market share, or a certain title because we believe success is reaching the top of a ladder. Everything around us conditions us to think that life is a scoreboard, that there is an end point, and that winning is the ultimate measure of value. But life is not a finite game. Leadership is not a finite game. Legacy is not a finite game. The real game is infinite. The infinite game has no finish line. There is no final whistle, no ultimate scoreboard, no point at which you can say, I've won forever. In the infinite game, the players change, the rules evolve, the conditions shift, and yet the game continues. It was being played before you arrived, and it will be played long after you're gone. The purpose of the infinite game is not to win, but to keep playing, to stay in the game, to keep growing, to keep contributing, to build something that lasts beyond you. The problem is too many people approach the infinite game with a finite mindset. They believe that if they reach a certain level of wealth, if they achieve a certain title, if they crush their competition, then they have won. But what happens when they reach that milestone? What happens when they realize someone else has already climbed higher, or when the market shifts, or when their so-called victory turns out to be temporary? They are left empty, disillusioned, or desperate to hold on to their position at any cost. That's the danger of playing a finite game in an infinite reality. The infinite game requires a different kind of mindset. It requires patience when the world rewards speed, requires vision when the world obsesses over immediate results. It requires resilience when the world is quick to discard what is no longer trending. The infinite game is about legacy, not victory. It's about endurance, not quick wins. It's about building trust, not casing applause. Let me give you an example. Think about companies that have lasted for generations. They didn't survive because they won every quarter. They didn't survive because they crushed every competitor. They survived because they kept adapting, because they focused on staying relevant, because they built relationships that endured. Their leaders weren't obsessed with being number one on a chart. They were obsessed with ensuring the company would still matter in 50, in 100, in 200 years. That's the infinite game. Contrast that with companies that rise quickly but burn out just as fast. They chase numbers, they boast about victories, they obsess about market dominance, and for a moment, it looks like they've won. But because they play as if the game has an ending, they eventually collapse when the game keeps going. They treated business as a sprint, when in reality it is a marathon without a finish line. This mindset shift is not only about organizations, it's about individuals too. Too many of us live as if we are playing a finite game with our careers, our relationships, even our lives. We set arbitrary milestones. By 30, I must have this. By 40, I must be here. By 50, I must be done. And when we don't hit those milestones, we feel like we're failing, or worse, when we do hit them, we look around and wonder, is this it? But if we adopt the infinite mindset, those milestones lose their grip on us. We stop asking, am I winning? And start asking, am I becoming better? Am I still growing? Am I still contributing? The infinite mindset frees us from the tyranny of comparison and allows us to focus on progress, purpose, and legacy. The infinite game is not easy because it asks us to embrace uncertainty. It asks us to keep showing up even when we don't know when or how the payoff will come. It asks us to invest in relationships, in trust, in values that may not produce immediate rewards. But those are the very things that sustain us in the long run. Those are the things that create reputations that outlast scoreboards. Those are the things that turn a fleeting career into a lasting legacy. And here's the paradox. The people who embrace the infinite game often achieve more in the finite sense too. Why? Because when you focus on building trust, people want to work with you. When you focus on constant growth, you stay relevant. When you focus on long-term vision, you make decisions today that will pay off tomorrow. Finite wins become byproducts of infinite thinking. The infinite game also changes how we see competition. In the finite world, we want to beat our rivals. We want to prove we're better. But in the infinite game, rivals are not enemies. They are teachers. They reveal to us where we can improve. They push us to raise our standards. They show us possibilities we may not have seen. The goal is not to beat them, but to learn from them, to use them as fuel for growth. In an infinite mindset, your competition is not the other person. Your competition is yourself. Who you were yesterday versus who you are becoming. Think about parenting. No parent thinks of raising a child as a finite game. There is no moment when you can declare, I've won at parenting. It's an ongoing relationship. You invest in your children, you guide them, you make mistakes, you learn, you adjust. You don't parent for trophies, you parent for growth, for love, for legacy. The same is true in leadership, in business, in life. If you play to win today, you may neglect tomorrow. But if you play for the long run, you build something that lasts. One of the hardest parts of the infinite game is resisting the pressure of the scoreboard. The world will always ask for proof, numbers, rankings, results. And yes, those things matter. They tell us if we are moving in the right direction. But they are not the goal. They are simply markers along the way. The goal is to stay in the game, to keep improving, to keep contributing. A business that only chases quarterly numbers eventually sacrifices its future. A person who only chases applause eventually loses themselves. But those who play the infinite game, who focus on becoming better, deeper, more purposeful, they endure. The infinite game also changes how we define success. Success is not beating someone else. Success is not crossing a finish line. Success is staying in the game. Success is being remembered not just for what you did, but for how you did it. Success is leaving behind something that others can build upon, something that continues long after you're gone. Success is knowing that you contributed to the game itself. The beauty of the infinite game is that it shifts our perspective from scarcity to abundance. In the finite world, if someone else wins, you lose. But in the infinite world, someone else's win can be your win too. In the infinite world, collaboration becomes more powerful than competition. Contribution becomes more meaningful than conquest. And legacy becomes more important than victory. The question we each must answer is, which game are we playing? Are we living as if the finish line is right around the corner, desperate to win before it arrives? Or are we living with the mindset that the game goes on and that our role is to leave it better than we found it? If you play the finite game, you may win for a moment. If you play the infinite game, you matter forever. And here is the truth: the infinite game is the only game worth playing. Because it is the game of life itself. There is no final winner in life, no ultimate scoreboard, no single person who can claim victory over everyone else. There are only those who contributed to making the game richer, better, more meaningful. And when you're gone, that is what will define you. Not the titles you held, not the numbers you hit, but the difference you made, the trust you built, the legacy you left. So let the others obsess over winning today. Let them fight for scoreboards that will be forgotten tomorrow. You choose to play the infinite game, choose to focus on growth, on contribution, on legacy, choose to build trust, to inspire others, to invest in what lasts. Because in the infinite game, you don't win by being the best. You win by staying in the game. You win by leaving behind something that endures. You win by making sure that when the game continues, and it always does, it is better because you played it.